off. This is morals over money. Put your morals over money.
We will uphold against anyone that stands against us.
Hello and welcome to the Truth Trumpet. I'm Beth.
I'm Steve.
We're so happy to be with you this evening. It is actually Remembrance Day today here in Canada, so we wanted to spend a moment to recognize all of the veterans who have sacrificed on our behalf for our freedoms, those who are currently serving in the military. We are so grateful to you for your service, and honestly, especially considering what many of us have gone through over the last 3 years, I think it's very good to take a moment and reflect on our freedoms and how and why we have those freedoms. Steve, do you have any thoughts?
Well, today's episode is going to be a great parallel from what Beth is talking about. Remembrance Day, the brave soldiers that fought and died, a lot of them for the freedoms that we currently take for granted. All of us, if not the majority of the population of the world, the free world. Our guest today is someone who, in a different swing, isn't a veteran as far as I know. He'll tell us, but he fought for our freedoms in a different way. So while there are some people who fought battles in court, some people who waved flags on bridges if they didn't have vehicles, a lot of people did their part. Our next guest played a tremendous role in the freedom movement that's taken place over the last couple of years here in Canada. And I would imagine his name has probably expanded past our borders into America, where they mimicked some of our convoy and other freedom maneuvers that we attempted here in Canada. So without further ado, Beth, why don't you introduce our guest?
We're going to bring our guest in right now.
Hi, guys.
Hello, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
This is Chris Barber. If some of you don't know, Chris was heavily involved with the convoy in Ottawa. So, Chris, I was hoping for those of us, those people in our audience who don't know you, if you could give us a little background on yourself.
Well, my name is Chris Barber. Like I said, I'm a Canadian truck driver. I'm a 32-year veteran of driving north and south, Canada, U.S. I'm a farm boy. We live on the family plantation per se. My great grandfather homesteaded here in 1905, and we're still on this land in the same area to this day. So, yeah, I kind of got tossed into a situation when, like many Canadians, we sit back and we're quite. We were angry, we were hurt, we were, the mental stability of majority of Canadians was down, really, really down. Depression was all-time high, drug abuse, alcohol, and a bunch of us decided to stand up and go for a little drive out east to have a conversation with the sitting prime minister. And well, we all know how that kind of happened.
Well, before we get to that pivotal moment in time, why don't you lead us up to how this kind of culminated in your town, in your business, just in your life in general. Let's go back to the end of 2019. Wuhan, China is putting out information around 13 to 15% death rate was their projections and models. And we were saying everything's fine here. Trump in America was saying maybe we should stop flights coming from that area. And we Canadians, our government and the Democrats in the States said that was xenophobic and racist, and inhibiting or prohibiting travel of foreigners is against human rights. So let's go back to that time frame there. And what was happening in your life? What was going on? What were you thinking? Tell us.
Well, so my business centralizes around hauling agriculture equipment in and out of the U.S. into Canada, and then doing local stuff around the provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So during the when the pandemic struck, I kept working. I remember about 2 weeks into the pandemic, I said to my wife, I said, "This is, we have no bathrooms, we have no restaurants, we're standing in drive-through lineups for McDonald's or Tim Hortons, with cars trying to get a cup of coffee in the morning." It was absolutely ridiculous and humiliating to say the least. So, like, the outdoors were our bathrooms. Nobody would let us in buildings, and I couldn't. I had about 2 weeks of that, and I couldn't take it anymore. I actually came home, and I think I lasted for about 2 weeks at home here before the customer base was calling and things had to be done. So at that time, there was no restrictions on the U.S. Canadian border for travel. We didn't have a passport per se for COVID vaccines to get back and forth, and it did well. Canadian truck drivers, American truck drivers were secluded in our vehicles. Our contact is limited with people. I mean, we were all of a sudden good through the beginning of the pandemic, and then all of a sudden, after 2 years, the federal government just wouldn't quit with these mandates, and implemented that January 15th, 2022 cross-border travel mandate for the COVID vaccine mandates. And I remember being that guy for the last number of years, just kind of, yelling at the steering wheel, pounding your fists on the steering wheel and just being angry at the direction of your country. And then, the opportunity arose, and man, if you would have told me 2 years later I'd be sitting where I am right now, and what we've accomplished in the world or in the country, I wouldn't have believed it.
Absolutely. So you're working, the mandates are starting to come into effect. I would say, I'm going off my memory here, but it feels like it was kind of like, if this is Canada and this is America, holding a slinky and kind of jockeying the positions. And Fauci says wear a mask, Tam says don't wear a mask, at first, and then they
Yeah.
flip-flop back and forth, each country kind of pivoting, so nobody has a footing or a foundation of knowledge or security really in their heart.
Yep.
So they're pushing a full vaccination round, I would imagine, at this
Yep.
point, if you want to continue working.
Yep.
So,
And that's what they did the whole way along, right? They did that with every sector of North America or the world per se, whether it was the health fields or they just kept, when was it going to stop?
yeah, absolutely. So the mandates came into effect. You had to make a choice, right? If I may ask, what was your choice? Do you want to disclose what your medical information?
Yeah. And this is probably the best part of the story, is I'm fully vaccinated. I have a card to cross the border into the US. I decided, for the betterment of my business and my family and my way of living, for years I built a customer base and looked after those egg dealers up in Canada here, and I had a commitment to them to keep going with that. If I wasn't in the position where I could just say, you know what, I quit. I'm the breadwinner in the family here. I'm the income. If I can't let my family down. I've got a mortgage to pay like most people. So, and I've got a lot of equipment that I have to upgrade on a regular basis too. And I wasn't going to let those big carriers that have been biting at my heels for so many years just all of a sudden take over my customer base because of this. So I got the job. I did what I had to do to carry on. And then about a week and a half to 2 weeks later is when the opportunity arose with another fellow social media person reached out to me and asked about this idea of a protest. And man, I was super excited to do something. I've been, like I said, yelling at the steering wheel for how many years, and all of a sudden it was time to go. So yeah, that's how it kind of came around.
Okay, before we go past that, I kind of I like to picture things, and I know how I felt. These, for me, without God, these would be a lot more troubling times. But before I got closer with God, it was pretty troubling and tumultuous within my own head, trying to discern between all the factors that were taking place with our government, with employers, with friends, with family that were of opposing opinions.
Mhm.
How did that conversation go at first with your wife? Let's say, like that in order to excuse me, to continue to cross the border, you're going to have to make a choice. And we know now the choice you made, but how did that conversation go? Was at the time, was your wife wanting you to get a shot? Was she wanting you to be reluctant? Just
Wow.
bring us back to that moment.
We were all in the same position, I'd have to say. My wife works as an educational assistant, works with one of the special needs kids in our local school division. And so she was forced to get the job to continue that job too. So just like my daughter, I always said my daughter tends to disagree with me now, but I remember her saying, she was basically bullied by other people in her school, that she was unvaccinated. They treated her like a plague rat. And so she succumbed to it as well. My 20-year-old son, he was 17, 18 at the time. He said, no, I am not doing this. My immune system is adequate and I will not take this stuff. And to this day, he still hasn't had COVID. Everyone that I know that has the shot has had COVID multiple times, including myself. I had COVID when we rolled east to the convoy, the Omicron virus. But my son was the tough one out of the family, so I applaud him.
It's amazing where we can draw some knowledge from. It's you wouldn't think from your own child, right? But I'm
Right.
even getting glimpses of that with my 5-year-old.
Really?
Yeah, where she puts me in check sometimes and makes me think like, wow.
Man,
I
before
mean,
you think about it, those kids are growing up, and that's where I'm sitting right now. I would have never thought I'd have an 18 and a 20-year-old, and it seemed like just yesterday my daughter was, doing the same thing to me, and she's still giving it to me now. So
That will never stop.
no, no.
So, Chris, I'm curious, as from a perspective of your customers, did you feel pressure from them that you should go ahead and get vaccinated? Or was
No,
it more the government pressure as far as their mandates?
no, it was more or less the government mandates of the federal government for sure. Even the provincial government, it all kind of added up. Like when the restaurants were finally open, where we could go and sit and have a meal again, it was fine until October of 2021 is when the Saskatchewan government implemented the COVID vaccine passports, and at that time I wasn't vaccinated, and I ate in the truck. It was. It was ridiculous. And it's still to this day, it seems like that you can't make this stuff up. I can't put myself in a place where I think this is comfortable, where we were all of a sudden good for how long, and then we weren't because we weren't vaccinated. So it kind of told you there's a bigger role. Government was doing something a little bit more than just trying to protect its people.
mm,
Was that hard for you to rectify personally, that all these things were happening, people were being segregated, and it was, just do your part, just get the shot?
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, I think it was about 6, 7 months. Yeah, I couldn't go in a restaurant, I couldn't go into
Yep.
stores. I was segregated from society, literally. And honestly, thinking back to that time period, it it's almost hard to believe that it happened.
It
But
burns.
absolutely, and I personally, I mean, even to this day, when I go to a restaurant or I actually just go out shopping, there is this part of me that has gratitude that I can do these things, because that was a very dark period for many of us, going through that situation.
And I argue with a lot of people on the internet on a regular basis. I'm kind of known for my social media, something I love to do, and banter back and forth. And one of the common things that the left side of people like to think or say is, what freedoms did you really lose? You didn't lose any freedoms. They were all privileges. Well, going to a restaurant is a privilege now. Going to a grocery store, going to a doctor's office, this is all privilege. Like, come on, this is stuff that and especially today, when we think of the symbolism of today on Remembrance Day, what those soldiers gave for our freedom, so we can do what we do today. And you think of what we've given up, and it doesn't sit right with me.
no, it's how soft we become as a society. We can make fun of millennials, and I do.
I do.
But but it's partially ingrained. I can tell. I can admit it with myself, my education system, the public education system, that that we were indoctrinated into. There used to be subtle socialistic type of teachings, and I know that because I would argue with my dad, when he would tell me what the right thing to do is, you got to get a job, and he'd try to get me in at a foundry or corn detasseling, and I don't know how to equate it. I didn't know how to articulate my words when I was in high school, but all I could think was, what kind of schmuck do you think I am that I'm going to go work my fingers to the bone when I could collect, I think it was like $593 was welfare at the time, right? $593 a month, which is not substantial, but when you're a kid, you can figure out ways to whittle down to, ramen noodles, blah, blah, blah. I remember thinking, like my dad looking at me, how I would probably look at my daughter now, perplexed, like, how can you think like this? Who taught you to think like this, right? But again, it's like I try to express to people here on the Truth Trumpet or anywhere they'll listen. Parents are around their children minimally per day. If you want to add up the time, it's still minimally. They're in school 8 hours a day. Maybe one parent's getting them ready for an hour in the morning. Maybe there's some broken up time for a couple hours after, but the meat of the day, they're being raised by someone else or someone's else. And over the course of 10 years, they have a lot more information from those someone else's than their parents. And if we're raised in that way back when I was in public school, and it's only gotten, it's not covert anymore, it's overt, it's out in the open, all the socialistic type tactics. So people don't feel that need of community, of working. They'd rather sit on their hands or say, like, work. It's like anything. Definitions have changed. To a young person, working 3 hours is all day. Like look at those TikTok videos or whatever of the Google workers or Twitter workers, like they go in their office and make a latte, and then they go in the boardroom with nobody there, but they hop on a meeting on Zoom for about 10 minutes. And then they go up to the patio for downtime because they've had a rough morning so far. And then they have some donuts in the cafeteria for free. And you get my point. We're in trouble generationally, and it shows in the military, or what the military will be. What can young people bring to the table that isn't taking from someone else? What can they offer that's not, socialistic, that they can't say, well, I can take from you. I don't know how to do anything other than customer service, because that's what we're all taught now. But I can take from your pile, and I can keep a little bit and hand a little bit to you. That's fair. That's equity. These are the words, the buzzwords we're throwing around now. But it's not easy with the next generation that's coming up. But they need to understand what freedom is, what freedoms that those people, our military and veterans fought for, and really the definitions of what privileges are, and what our freedoms, our innate freedoms are,
and what hard work is.
Yeah.
Well,
Chris, what's an average day for you?
Well, I really, the last couple months, you really can't judge my work ethic. It's been courtroom after courtroom, and these days where it just drives me nuts. I think I'm losing the calluses on my hands from the amount of not working. I drove 3,000 kilometers home from Ottawa here last week, and I turned on my gravel road, and I actually turned my signal light on a gravel road with nobody in front of me or nobody behind me. So okay, I need some farm here. I'm one of those guys that can't sit still. I'm when I'm going in the morning, I'm go till I drop at night, and I'm very active. I've been, like I said, used to driving truck for 30 some years and putting in solid days. We run horses in the backyard back here. We've got a barn. We put up our own hay. We're on the farm. If the sewer goes down, you don't call the local plumbing company. You fix it yourself most of the time. Same with your water system. And and my parents are a mile away from me on the farm where I was born and raised. So it's community. When I'm gone out east for this, my father's down here looking after my animals and helping out as much as he can. When they're gone, they're in their 70s. They're retired farmers. When they go away for holiday, we're up there looking after their animals. And That's how I was raised. We were raised around a kitchen supper table for lunch, supper, as a family. Nobody ever ate in a living room or anywhere else. We were there at 6 o'clock for supper, or we got our tail kicked by my mother, and that would be the way it is today. So I think that's missing now and today. You know, my mother was a stay-at-home mother. Sorry, she gave up her job so that we were raised properly, and it's sad now that it takes so much to make a living in this country now that you have to have both of those parents working, normally, and I think that's where we started to lose things.
Chris, do you think that maybe that's why people were so compliant, because our society has shifted away from family, from hard work, and it seems more like the state is valued, their opinions valued more.
Yeah.
I heard constantly like, well, just do your part, or listen to the government. And I don't know, we're all around the same age. Growing up, I was taught critical thinking. I
Yes.
was taught to question everything, quite honestly.
No.
And I was just curious if you feel that, because the way you described growing up, I think that's how many of us in our 40s, that's how we grew up. I mean, I didn't grow up on a farm, but we had dinner every night. My mother made me read the newspaper every day and given a report on what and I think about that now, the newspaper when I was a kid to now, it's,
Oh,
it's so do you think that that was part of the reason that people, that just that foundation of family and hard work kind of got people so compliant so quickly?
I think it's been conditioning for years. I think the government has done, its job to get us to where we are today. My father, here's a good story for you. My father, the same guy that I've sat around the supper table with for many many years, and I consider he was really hard on me growing up. When I needed it, of course. He's one of my best friends now. We're very very close. But Dad was, go out and get the shot, do your part. This is the best way through this. Don't put yourself. Look after your neighbor, and he got his booster shot when it was available, thinking he was doing the right thing, and his gallbladder quit working, which is a really common thing with people that get the vaccine. Is it'll attack the weakest organ in your body. When they finally figured out what was wrong with him, he'd lost probably 20, 30, 40 pounds, something like that. I watched my father get old really really fast, and shuffles when he walks. And it was that time that he woke up, because when he went into the clinic, when the doctor to get his gallbladder out, the doctor said that's all he does now is gallbladder surgery after gallbladder surgery every day. And when you're 70 years old, you're never going to gain that weight back. I watched my father get old, and he woke up. He woke up. My mother woke up, and they are one of my biggest supporters to this day now. But it's the same thing. It's like the government came into our homes and found a way to divide us within our homes now. And they've done it for years. They've divided us east versus west. They've divided us with skin color, with the, nationality, whatever it may be. The government's always been at the center of trying to find a way to divide us. And this time they made it in their own darn home. And there's families out there that won't spend Christmas together because somebody isn't vaccinated in the household, even though what's the death rate on COVID? 0.1%, something like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, it's ingrained as well. Like many of us, I don't want to say predicted, because it's just you run through scenarios in your head, right? And the normalization of these things, it's a sad thing to watch, because people like us can say, don't wear a mask. We can show the data, the facts, the things Dr. Peter McCullough shows, and other doctors, Malone, all of them. We can show that stuff. Not only does it not matter to them in the moment, but as time goes on, now it's been a couple of years of this, and there obviously, thank the Lord, are people that have woken up during the process, or there still will be some that do wake up. And I hope it's everybody. I just know it won't be. But there's many people, and I'm sure you see the zombies out there as well, still at the stores, that have the second, or they don't need a cue from the television to say, oh, cases are up. They've already they know they're doing the right thing. They're helping the neighbor out, protecting grandma, or they're just looking out for their safety and they're putting a mask on or getting the next shot, COVID flu booster that's coming out. And they'll do it in lockstep for the rest of their lives. It's like a programming that's been solidified in some people's minds.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the sad part with them. But we have hope that there'll always be people like your dad, really, that unfortunately, make these choices or coerced by the myriad of propaganda that's around them, that's around everybody. But then something happens, and like I said, I really do need to coin a new phrase. I used to say,
Gut punch.
yeah, gut punch. I used to say something else a couple of years ago before I got a relationship with God, but people need that gut punch from God. Personally, unfortunately, we all do. It seems like before we decide to turn away from the distractions that we've surrounded ourselves with in our world, to not care about those distractions, even if it's for a brief moment. It's like that gut punch allows clarity in the mind to go, I don't need to watch this show that every day I got to watch it. Nothing matters except the show. In this moment, I don't care about that show. My gut hurts. They don't think about anything about what happened to this relative or what happened to their friend. And all of a sudden, maybe for the first time, cognitive thinking starts happening. They start asking questions in their mind that they obviously don't have the answers to, and then they have to seek it out. And they can't seek it out from the usual places because they'll find the NPC automatons that they go to, and they'll repeat what they've heard their entire time. Should I have taken the shots or another one? And they'll get, yes, of course, do the right thing. And they'll be like, I already know that. But there's something else now, I feel. And that activation is what I hope for and pray for in the populace. Unfortunately, currently, everybody right now seems to be trying to divide over a issue that's not even here in our country.
Yeah, it seems like the Palestinian-Israel debate that's one that's coming right now. I seen a video today of somebody in Ottawa trying to protest Palestine in the middle of the Remembrance Day ceremony, and I thought to myself, are we really got to this point now in the country where you feel it's necessary to stand in the middle of Remembrance Day ceremonies and this? Wow.
Yeah,
It's actually so discouraging to think that someone would actually do that, how disrespectful that is, and that they're literally so oblivious to it. They've been told that their virtue signaling is much more important than actually giving respect to people who lost their lives, were injured, or were in battle for our freedoms, for the fact that they can actually go and do that. It is extremely disheartening. And I think it just shows the bigger picture of, as we were talking about earlier, where we've gone to as a society, away from God, away from family, away from hard work. Mm-hmm. Now, Chris, I was hoping we could kind of dial back to when you were talking about that you got a message about a protest back when you had made the decision that you were, in fact, going to get vaccinated. It was the best decision for your business, for your family. But clearly, you felt that it wasn't right and you wanted to do something about it. So kind of walk us through the beginning stages of that.
Well, the video went out, I guess, on February or January 7th of 2022, and all it was talk about slow rolling, taking our semis, and standing up provincially at our own legislative grounds and doing some sort of a protest all across the country. And that's the way it was initiated, I guess. And then in later conversation, the more people that came into the conversation and the more ideas that started flowing around it, the idea morphed to, hey, it's a federal mandate that's coming in that's affecting all of our lives and putting so many of our fellow truck drivers out of work. Another thing that the government likes to say is they say 10% of Canadian truck drivers are not vaccinated. I call bull baloney on that charge. I think it's closer to 35 to 40%. I know a lot of people that changed their lifestyles in their driving. They then switched to just running Canada only. it affected my career and my business. I had all this work in the U.S., and then all of a sudden I was stuck with I had no help. So I mean, I've always been busy in my company. I run a decent small business here, but I couldn't keep up, and it was agonizing to try and keep up with the workload that was coming, and we just lost that many drivers. So it just morphed into this thing, and I believe it was like February 13th. I got a phone call from this lady in Medicine Hat. Tamara Litch called me and said, I'd like to help out. I work as a logistics specialist in a trucking company, and I can definitely help. And at that point, we needed a social media, something to keep the word going. There was a lot of people that were interested in this thing. And so Tamara joined forces, and then I met her, approximately 2 weeks later when we drove to Redcliffe, Alberta, to meet the West Convoy, where we met up with everybody and then led the way all the way to Ottawa. So I got to meet this amazing lady, Tamara Litch. I get to sit with her, side by side in the courtroom now in Ottawa, and that's the only time I can speak with her. We still have court conditions against us with our bail conditions,
So
I
one of the
guess.
gag orders is you can't speak with each other outside of the courtroom currently?
No, we can't. We have to have a legal counsel present. So the only time we can speak is when we're sitting right with the lawyers all day long in court. So it's definitely trying. I met this amazing lady and her husband, Dwayne. Um, Hit it off really well with everyone. And then we basically got to spend about a month together out in Ottawa with the protest. And then, as everybody knows Tamara's story, she went to jail for about 49 days in total. That was pretty agonizing to watch. Some of the conditions she had to go through there when she tells her story on it will be pretty horrific to listen to. But yeah, we're still fighting that same battle now. It's just more polarizing.
So, talk about the actual drive out to Ottawa. What was that like? Did people in your company join you? Did you have other friends as truck drivers join you as well? How was that seeing the crowds? Just give us an
Oh.
idea of the experience.
Well, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4" and I'm 260 pounds. I don't tend to cry a lot, but I'll tell you what, every single day it was agonizing trying to hold the tears back, watching, the ditches full, the parking lots full, the overpasses full, the Canadian flags. I'm a guy that spent a lot of time in the United States trucking, and I always admired the fact that the Stars and Stripe was something that they held high. It was always flown. They always, the U.S. They love their flag, patriotic, stars and stripes. And I thought, that kind of sucks in Canada that we don't look at our flag the same way. I mean, of course we do, but not to the extent that the Americans do. And that's one of the biggest things about the Freedom Convoy is people looked at that flag a different way. And the drive that I take now to Ottawa, I've done it twice. I'll do it 3 times here in the next couple of weeks. There's so many flags that adorn Highway number 1 on people's driveways and people's houses, mailboxes, that sort of thing. It's remarkable. Winnipeg, Manitoba, to this day holds the prize for the most people coming through the city. Headingley, it was absolutely breathtaking. The amount of people we seen, the campfires, the snowmobiles that were in the ditches, the people parked. And it was minus 20, minus 30 degrees. And we were late. That was one of the biggest things that irritated me was we were always late with the convoy. We could never kind of keep a schedule. And when you realize that you were 30 miles long in length, no wonder it was hard to keep a schedule. We would average 60 kilometers a day or 60 kilometers per hour. And we'd lose a lot of time in the day. And then you stop for your breaks, for your meals and your breaks along the side of the highway. And just the volume of Canadians that came out to support us and stand on the side of the highways, man, I regret not putting a GoPro camera on the mirror of the truck to capture what we seen, and truly breathtaking.
In hindsight, that's one of the things I thought too afterwards is that would have been a smart idea. And I have a GoPro, but just just didn't think about it. Even up in Ottawa, I didn't think to have battery packs because of how cold it is, right? And how it drains electronics. It's just you live and learn in the moment. You don't think of things sometimes until after you live it.
That's the best thing about it. It was all grassroots, and nobody knew what we were doing. Nobody knew where you would be in any certain day. You just know that you were drawn to Ottawa to go, to take a stand and bring community again, right?
And did you have that feeling too as you're driving? I have I only had about an 8 to 10 hour drive from where I'm from to get to Ottawa, but obviously, clearly, you're going cross country. So the feeling I got when I drove up was, at first, you have no idea, right? You really don't know, right? All we had the Zillow app, and you don't even know what's going to happen with that, but there'll be people there, but you don't really know anything in between. You don't know if the cops are going to block off roads, if they're going to mess with you. But the one thing on my short little distance that I felt that I couldn't articulate really until now is, I felt very quickly after the first few minutes of turmoil, of feeling alone, because I drove alone by myself. All of a sudden, a feeling of like a warm blanket, a hug, a national hug. Like, even when you weren't passing through an overpass, once you saw that site or a few of those sites, to me it felt like everything's going to be okay. The journey there will be okay. Like, that, any kind of angst that I had left me once I started feeling that. What was it like for you? Was it worrisome the whole way through?
No. No, you felt the presence of a higher power, immediately through the whole thing. You felt the security and the prayers of Canadians, the prayers of the world. We had the eyes of the world watching us. You don't put I've always said, this is another thing I say too. You put 200 truck drivers in a room and close the doors. Somebody's going to walk out of there with a fat lip and a broken nose. We put how many truck drivers in 30 miles of traffic and in Ottawa, and not one altercation. So, the presence of God was huge. The safety, I don't think you could recreate it without having some sort of issue. There's just no other way to explain it. There's a higher power right from the beginning, and there is to this day. Tamara and I both walk into the courtroom, and you listen to them tear your life apart, or evidence, and their mission is to put us in jail for 2 to 10 years, is what the Crown's position. So there isn't anxiety when we walk into the courtroom. We know that no matter what happens, we've already won. Whether it's a guilty verdict or an innocent verdict, we've already won. We've already woken up a lot of people. We've saved a lot of people. I get letters from Canadians, all the time, stating how their lives were just so dark and dismal, and alcohol, drugs, the thought of suicide was right there on many people's minds. And then the trucks fired up, and that the thought went away. So I've met with a few people that have sent me these letters. I can tell you, man, like, emotional. You can't help but hold the tears back when you listen to some of these people's stories. And you think to yourself too, even in the darkest days right now, when my life is in turmoil. I haven't been able to work for a couple months. I'm living 3,000 kilometers away from home. I'm in the public spotlight. My poor wife, gets to walk into the courtroom with a crowd of reporters, and we've got a couple trolls from around the Ottawa area that like to harass us on the way in. And we still have that security blanket around us. We know that we're looked after, and we know that we're on the right path.
Amen.
Amen. Chris, when you started out, were you surprised by the amount of people? Were you
Yes.
expecting that?
Yeah, no, we didn't know what to expect. We had no idea what there would be for numbers. January 24th was the day when I left the yard, and it was dark that morning, and we left about 6 o'clock in the morning. The truck was all warmed up, ready to go. My wife stood on the deck of the house. She didn't go with me. She has a job that she had to look after the kid, the boy that she looks after. So she stayed home for it, but she recorded me leaving the yard in big red in the dark. And she said, she put a Facebook post out there saying just how proud she was. And we met in the Swift Current fuel card lock parking lot. And it was just coming down the highway, you're like, please let some people be there, so this, isn't a waste. And the parking lot was full. And then we all convoyed to Medicine Hat, Red Cliff, where we picked up Tamara. And to see the people standing on the overpasses on the side of the highway, anticipating what we were when we were leaving, it was like, there's people here. Like, there's people here. And as we drove across the prairies, especially in the middle of nowhere where there was no farms or nothing, you would have the local Hatarian colony members coming out to the side of the highway and supporting us. And then we'd pass and they'd pass us again just so they could stand on the side of the highway and watch us travel by again. Man, and all the way across country. Like it was just everywhere you went, there was the sheer number of people, and it was you knew it was going to be something at that point then, and all that anxiety that you had, on the way out there, worried that anybody was going to actually pay attention to you. You didn't have anything to worry about.
So what was it like when you got to Ottawa?
That was something else. We, as most people know, we were led into Ottawa. We actually had a police escort right from the Ontario border. OPP gave us a police escort all the way through Ontario for safety reasons. We then switched off with OPS, Ottawa City Police, and they led us right down through Johnny MacDonald Parkway and right onto Wellington, actually. And just to come into town to see the amount of people standing on Wellington, citizens of Ottawa, people that drove from wherever just to watch that historic moment of us rolling into Ottawa. And we made it just about to the Supreme Court, and we ran out of room. There'd been a whole bunch of people that showed up the night before, and so that was where Big Red was parked for the first week, I guess. Would have been right in front of the Supreme Court, and yeah, it was. I've got a video of on my phone that I haven't shown too many people yet of us rolling right into Ottawa, and it was just, yeah, it was awesome. It was really awesome.
So kind of describe the first few days you were there. Did you have any idea what would happen? Did you guys kind of have a game plan?
Did you get out and meet all the other truckers along the road there, John A. MacDonald Road?
We did, yeah. So it became really evident right off the bat. I told this to Tamara. I said I didn't want to be the person standing at the microphone speaking to the media, but I would be the person standing beside that person. And Tamara was kind of pushed into the role of being one of the persons that led the news conferences, that did the speaking. So my job was basically then to run out to make sure everybody was looked after on the side roads. There was a lot of trucks that were stuck out on Sir John A. Macdonald and all around the city for that fact. When they shut it down, a lot of people wanted to be at the center of attention. So that's where you had the trucks wind up in some of the residential areas. And then after that, it was basically I took it as my role to try and make sure emergency lanes were open and somebody was working with law enforcement on a daily basis. So, man, I lost about 20 pounds walking. That's all we did all day, was just walk the streets of Ottawa, talking to the people that were there, standing with us, to the truckers that were there needing any help, working with law enforcement to make sure emergency lanes were open. And that was the job up until, for 3 weeks, I guess.
Isn't that ironic too, that it seemed during, we'll call it the time of the convoy, that, and this is anecdotal, right? I don't have statistics, but from my eyes and witness other people that were there, you, Shaba, other truck drivers, many other people that were there.
Yep.
It was I would challenge statistically that if you go back on the numbers and if they're honest, that there was less crime during the time of the convoy than the remainder of the year, or past time or future time. I'd even extend that to. Like you were saying, people like you, and I know other people that were doing it, were trying desperately to work with law enforcement to show that we're the side of benevolency, that we want to uphold the law, and we just have a message. And we wanted to keep the lanes open. And of course, we still wanted to have truck drivers have fuel for their vehicles so they didn't freeze. But go into more detail. Now you're parked there. You've got kind of a lay of the land of the other truckers that were there. Were you concerned at all about having food or provisions or anything like the media was saying, how dumb this was for truckers and people to come down there and not be prepared? And go ahead and let's pretend that no one here has. What's Ottawa? What are you talking about, the convoy? What did you witness as you walked around, whether it be daytime or nighttime, in the frigid cold of Ottawa in the dead of winter, minus 30 degrees?
Yep.
What shenanigans or beautiful things did you witness?
Well, I heard the stories, like you heard the stories that the truckers went into the Shepherds of Good Hope, what would it be? The
Homeless
shelter.
shelter?
Yeah, the homeless shelter, and we stole all the food, That
Oh,
that
gee.
didn't happen. There was more food than anybody could ever imagine there. The homeless, all kind of the homeless people were looked after. The crime rate was down. They say 90%. I'd say it's almost 100% for 3 weeks there. That we went out and bought I think it was 100 snow shovels, and we shoveled the snow on the streets. The community people, anybody that ventured out of their house in Ottawa came down to the convoy and seen exactly how much love it was. I see a lot of people putting a lot of pressure on, you know, the downtown core and what they went through, but there was one thing that was missing in this whole thing. It was a conversation with a sitting prime minister that never happened. All we got was insults and name calling and that sort of thing. But nobody puts the pressure back on him for being such a, you know, intolerant leader. You expect more from your leaders.
Yeah,
We
even
showed,
here.
yeah, yeah, all of them per se,
All
like
of
all
them.
of them.
Yes,
Yeah.
every last one of them.
Yeah.
You got members like Leslyn Lewis, and she openly talks about walking through the convoy to go to Parliament Hill every day. Here you've got an African American member of Parliament walking through this vast group of white supremacists, like the media likes to call us, and she felt safe. I mean, come on. Anybody that can have a conversation with somebody would have seen what the true nature of the protest was. We had people from Alberta hugging somebody from Quebec on the side of the street there and finding common ground with just about anyone. And that was the love. There was love. There wasn't any disruptions. There wasn't any negativity. In the trial, they've brought quite a few witnesses in to say that bad things happened, but I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything for the entire time of the protests.
Was
No.
it hard for you to hear this mainstream narrative that the truckers were there to cause a ruckus, and what you just described to me just sounds like love and unity? How did you feel about that? Were you hearing the reports that were going out?
Yeah. We've always relied on legacy media in this country for our news source. And I think the convoy opened up a lot of eyes to see just how biased and controlled our legacy media was or is by the federal government. And the government used them as a propaganda tool. They put out to this day, I'd like to know what member of our government owns the swastika Nazi flag that they walked out on Parliament Hill and flew it around, because it was a photo op. It
Exactly.
was never there by any of the protesters that I stood with, and I want to know who owns that dang flag. Like, somebody in Ottawa owns a Nazi flag, and I would really like to know. They use it as propaganda against us, and a lot of people out there believe that narrative. Unfortunately, it just goes back into the whole how programmed we are as society, right?
Yeah. Well, in the photo that I saw, the photo that they used, it seemed to me that where the photo was taken, where that person with with the swastika, right, that seemed to be in an area that none of us were allowed to be in the
Right.
first place. So how could it have been? And trust me, I mean, I'm sure I didn't see them. I didn't see anybody being ornery or being violent, not from our
No.
side. But I was pretty adamant and pretty overt at trying to get as close to Parliament as possible, talking to those Parliament officers. I'm trying to eliminate
Parliament
words that
Supreme.
I have running through my head. Yeah, because they weren't the nicest, and I was trying to be pleasant, polite, trying to get information. I was putting on my white hat, trying to
Right.
be a nice citizen, and
Mhm.
so I could get a story, get more information, get a camera on things. And we were definitely not allowed anywhere near the area where that photo was taken. So
It's funny because that flag kind of came out of the towards the Chateau Laurier, I believe. It came out of, like, east side of Parliament somehow, and it's just funny that Justin Trudeau's personal photographer was standing right there, right? And they were in a secluded area of Parliament on Parliament Hill, and they got their photo shots. They're still shots, by the way. They're
yeah,
still shots. It wasn't a video of it. And then
they
they
set up.
disappeared. Then they disappeared back in the thing. But like Have you guys watched the documentary Unacceptable yet?
Yes, we actually, our church screened it.
Good.
So,
Good.
yes.
That is a documentary that's near and dear to my heart. Benjamin Hobb and Eagle Vision Visual Productions in Fort St. John they're good friends of ours. I actually blew them off when Benjamin was filming that. Tamara had reached out through lawyers and stated, like Benjamin's going to try and get a hold of you. Just kind of give him an interview. And at that point, I was pretty nervous. We were arrested, we were charged, and we had conditions. So I kept my mouth shut and I didn't do anything. And then I watched this documentary in Calgary at the premiere of it, and I fell in love with it. I mean, how do you sit there and watch that documentary and not become emotional umpteen dozen times through the middle of it? I've watched it 13 times and I still get emotional on it. It's an amazing film, and it tells the truth. It tells the story of the media and the propaganda. I mean, the myth behind the Terry Fox statue and people desecrating it, or the war monument.
Well, let's talk about that for a quick second, because we don't have to talk about the actual incident so much, but the psychology behind this propaganda push that we all saw clearly. The Terry Fox monument, right? So wreaths, flags adorned, like a cape around the neck, flowers strewn about, and they call that desecrating. Clearly, obviously, it's not. There wasn't spray paint. There was nothing that needed to be cleaned up. It's flowers, and we can go on for days about how it's not. But how is it, or what do you think, from your opinion? How do they fool the general public? Or how does the general public allow themselves to be fooled by seeing an image of Terry Fox statue, seeing Canadian flags around the neck, and then whatever propaganda they're saying while showing the image? And just this week, we have the exact same Terry Fox monument with
Palestinian flag on it.
Yeah, and other swag of Palestine, or the Palestinian movement, whatever you want to call it, that is all over the Terry Fox monument, along with some negative banter and spray painting and things like that that's happening. There is actual desecration under the definition of desecration. How is it we have the same statue, two completely different tools utilized on it? One is oppositely being called desecration, the other was being called, I don't know what they're calling it, but they're not calling it
They're
names.
not condemning it.
They're perching it on a pedestal of virtue.
Because I think the stigma of hate comes along with it. You've got a group of blue collar Canadian like-minded citizens that are just looking for answers from their federal government standing up, and the best way to put them down where they belong, keep them in their place, how dare you stand up, is to just spread as many lies and hate towards them as possible, because that a certain percentage of the population is going to believe that stuff. And that's, like GoFundMe. There's an example right there. Black Lives Matter, and like the turmoil of the Black Lives Matter and the protests they had over George Floyd all across the U.S. I mean, they burnt communities down. Antifa took over communities with armed assailants, and in Seattle, I believe it was. People were murdered, and yet that
was mostly peaceful protest, is what the caption said.
Right. Whether it's $60 to $90 million it was raised, and then you find out afterwards that mansions were bought in Toronto and in different spots all over the U.S. When you've got almost $20 million raised to the GoFundMe and the Give Send Go in Canada for the truckers, and that was shut down and is still sitting in escrow right now. What wasn't given back to the Canadian citizens that donated was now sitting in an escrow account awaiting a judge's ruling on a $400 million lawsuit that's been launched against people like Tamara and I.
Some quick rapid fire questions about that I've heard along the way from people within the Freedom movement, and I'm sure they've either already asked you, you've answered it maybe. Why, you might not have been in the know of the vaccines before. Of course, you were presented with the corruption of that. and all the things beforehand, but there was some knowledge within, I don't know if you want to say the freedom movement, because this was kind of the beginning of it, but within the conspiracy or alternate media movement, that GoFundMe was doing this on other circumstances in the States, other cherry pick circumstances. They kind of showed their colors. Do you have any insight or knowledge on why that was chosen instead of Give, Send, Go at first, or if there were any other options? Or did you guys know about the potential loss that might happen there?
No, we didn't, and that was maybe the like the grassroots of how we all came together. It was a, who do you go with? I didn't know anything about Give, Send, Go, I guess, previous to the convoy. Jacob Wells runs Give, Send, Go. He's a good Christian man. He runs one really, really top-notch organization there. And he wasn't going to buckle to the government demands and the seizure, the closure of the Give, Send, Go. So we hit the reset button or the refund button, just pushed it, and the money went right back to whoever it was donated from, and didn't give them a chance to try and to steal it. So whereas GoFundMe was right there. Adam and that CEO testified at the POEC, I believe, too. And like, corrupt as the day is long, and in the back pocket of government agencies and willing and ready to listen. And it goes farther than that. I have been deplatformed when it comes to Stripe, or not Stripe, sorry, which is the financing company I use for my merchandise now. I'm lost for words right now. Tamara, she was taken off of PayPal. They sent her an email saying that they no longer wanted to do any business with her. Square is the one that I was removed from. So this is a big network of government. They listen to whatever the government says. We just lost a bank account in the Niagara region. We did a fundraiser here about 2-3 weeks ago for some people that are facing trial right now in Ottawa. We raised a significant amount of money, and the credit union in the Niagara region just phoned them up and said, "Hey, we no longer want to do business with you because you deposited a bunch of cash here the other day, and it was going to legal fees for some of the truckers." So it's still going on to this day. People need
And
to
within the
watch
credit unions too, eh?
Yes.
Would you be willing to name the credit unions so other people maybe don't go to them?
All I'll say, it was a Niagara Region credit union. There's a few of them there. I don't actually know the name. The people that I was fundraising with that day or trying to help out were the ones in charge of that. I just got the phone call saying that they were being debanked. So they didn't take the funds. They just had to go in and remove all the funds into the bank account, and then the bank account was closed, and the credit union no longer wants to deal with them. So there is a really good credit union in Alberta, by the way, Bow Valley Credit Union in Alberta, based out of Calgary. I think they've got a couple other locations outside of Calgary. They're freedom-based people. A lot of the people that have been debanked in this movement so far have now found comfortable banking with Bow Valley Credit Union for anybody in Alberta. So
Nice. So anyone listening, write that down, especially if you're in the Alberta area or you do business there. Maybe it's smart to get an account or move your accounts to that credit union.
yep.
So, Chris, there were press conferences going on daily. There was interaction with the police. Kind of walk us through how things started to go sideways for the convoy.
Yeah, I'm sure you had some nice
Oh.
police liaisons.
We did, and they're testifying against us right now in court. We still have one in the stand. So I can't say I had a bad experience with any law enforcement officials within the convoy. Right up until the day I was arrested, I had my morning meeting, and Justice McLean on the 16th of February did a ruling on us with the Horn injunction, stated that we were still a legitimate protest, even though the day before that Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act. So we had a right to be there. We had a right to be there, and we had legal counsel there stating that. We had a judge stating that we were still a legitimate protest. And it is what it is. I was arrested on the 17th. I spent a total of 26 hours in the jail cell in Ottawa City Police, and I was released with conditions that I had 24 hours to exit the city of Ottawa, and I had 72 hours to exit the province of Ontario. And that was then what happened. I'd moved Big Red out of Ottawa. We had a threat of violence towards it about 2 weeks before that. So if anybody knows me and my truck Big Red, they know that it is my baby. I have owned this truck. It'll be 20 years old on the 27th of November. That's how long I've owned it. I bought it brand new. And my son Jonathan was the first passenger. Yeah, Jonathan was the first passenger in the passenger seat at 7 months old. So it tells
Wow.
you the history. I've got a lot of history in that truck. So when I found out that the threats were made, violence towards my truck, I got it warmed up and I got it the daylights out of the downtown core out to a staging area outside of Ottawa where we used it for a couple slow rolls and got it all working again.
So how was it on the drive back for you? What was going through your head? Kind of walk us through the trip home.
Well, my wife would contest to this that it was probably the most enjoyable trip of her life. Um, Ottawa City Police confiscated my cell phone when I was arrested, so I had no cell phone on the way home. I had my son Jonathan with me, my little dog Zippy. My wife was out there; she'd flown out to Ottawa to be with us for the protest, and one other passenger, one of the road captains from Saskatchewan. So there was four of us in the cab of this truck, and I was mentally burnt out, I'd have to say. So my wife Rael and I just kind of lied in the bunk of the truck and talked, and it was pretty surreal. We had to take all the banners off the truck. A lot of people would come up to us at the stops when we'd stop, and hugs and thanks, and yeah, we arrived back to Swift Current, my hometown, on I don't even remember what day it was. The parking lot in the local shopping mall was full of people, and it was just full of people to welcome us back home. And then it was home. I remember waking up at 4:30 in the morning that we got home, and not being able to sleep, and literally just sitting in my living room in the dark, watching a TV that wasn't even turned on. It was
Would you say the mood? How was the mood with others that you spoke to? Were people disheartened by what happened? Kind of talk about that.
Well, we wanted an audience with our sitting prime minister. We wanted some explanation you know, why people were killing themselves in this country and the government was doing nothing to stop that. And I felt that enough people showed up on the doorstep of our nation's capital to have a conversation. The least thing they could have done was had that conversation with us. So a lot of people were in disbelief that this was actually happening. You go from such a loving and peaceful protest, and it'll always go down in the history as the most peaceful protest in the world. We had that many people there and not one single act of violence. Um, so people were just disheartened, and a lot of people still couldn't believe what was happening, even when you had riot squads, beating innocent protesters in front of our in front of our parliament system there. To this day, it seems a little disheartening to watch those videos of what actually happened, and just how low we sunk as a country, right? I don't think a lot of people will ever get over that.
Did you actually see any of the violence from the police firsthand?
No, no, I was arrested. I was released. A little story that goes with that. I was released later in the night on the 18th of February, and the police station. It was basically walk up the stairs from where the holding cells were. You'll see a brown door and exit the building. And so I'm standing there. I have no cell phone. I have a winter jacket on, and I walk out to just pure silence. There was, a lot of snow on the ground. We had had a snowstorm the day before that. I had no sense of direction. I didn't know which way was northeast. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew that my wife and my son and my dog were in a hotel room in the Sheridan Hotel in downtown Ottawa. And thank gosh, there was a guy standing at the traffic light. I yelled at him and I said, "Hey, which way to the War Monument?" And he said, he pointed the finger to the north and said, "About a mile." So I started walking, and I walked all the way back to the apartment. The lawyer said, "You walk back to the apartment," or I don't think I even had that conversation until I got back to the apartment and was handed a cell phone from the lawyers. And they said, "You keep quiet, you shut your mouth, you exit the city in the morning." I walked right down to the hotel room, up into the room. I spent the night there. I was down the elevator and out into an awaiting car the next morning, and out to the outskirts of the city to fire up the truck and start that long drive home.
Wow. So once you were back home, how did your life progress after that? Did you just kind of go back to work? What was life like for you?
I did. I've always, I've been kept the trucks going. So I think one of my first runs after I got back from the convoy, I took about a week and a half off just to kind of collect my thoughts and try and regain some composure. It was such a life-changing ordeal for basically the month there. And yeah, it took a couple loads hauling equipment around the provinces, and was really nervous about the first time I had to cross the border. Could I cross the border? I hadn't been convicted of anything, but I'd been charged. So of course, the border agents now for 30 some years, I pulled up to the border, and when they say, "Have you ever been arrested or fingerprinted?" and I've always been able to say no. And so that changed, and then you have to answer the questions that come along with that. And even border patrol, they've been really, once they kind of snicker at the charges and send you on your way, and I haven't had a single issue with that at all. But I've always been trucking. It's been up until the last couple months where it's been hard. My son is running the business now. I've handed over control to him. He's dispatching the 4 trucks that are on the road and the couple pilot trucks, and he's doing a really good job. My daughter's looking after a lot of the paperwork that comes along with it, as well as myself. I've got my laptop with me wherever I go, and I can pretty much come in and help out or assist. Big Red is basically out of service now. The safety expired on it at the end of September. So, and it had some stuff that needed to be fixed on it. The ABS light was on, and a couple brakes were close. So, told myself after we get done with this court thing in January, February, I'll be maintaining the truck, getting it ready for spring. It is quite hard to drive down the highway in Big Red now and not be recognized. Somebody pulling up beside you, waving and honking and meeting in parking lots. It's definitely a notarized truck now.
Chris, I can't imagine being a law-abiding citizen your whole life, working for 30 years, owning a business, being an outstanding citizen, taking care of your family, raising children, running a farm, and suddenly you're faced with the prospect of having to say, yes, I've been arrested and I've been charged. It's just so disheartening for me in the sense that here we have so many people in your situation, law-abiding citizens who just wanted to have their voice heard. And it wasn't like it was you exclusive. We're talking millions of Canadians on the same page. And that's evident from the videos that we saw, from the testimonies of both of you, the testimonies of anything, of so many, all the video footage that we saw, contrary to the narrative of the mainstream media. And for people like yourself to be villainized and actually have to have been charged, period, and going through your situation, I give you so much credit for being composed and for pressing on in such difficult circumstances.
Well, like Tamara and I said, one of Tamara's saying was, you keep your eye on the prize, and the prize is getting past these mandates, and now I guess the task is to get through these court things, because we've opened a lot of eyes. And so if we didn't have the support of the community behind us, or just average Canadians, it would be a totally different ball game for us. We would be in a completely different spot mentally. But it's the fact that we've got people from, even the downtown core of Ottawa will have people come into the courtroom and say like, "Hey, thank you," and a pat on the back or a hug, and in conversation with them, that you'll find out that they're from downtown Ottawa, and you say like, they would attend the convoy every day or come down to Wellington and see what was going on. You've got the ones that don't support it, and that's understandable. If it's not always not everybody's cup of tea, but the support is the big thing, and I think that's what keeps us so strong and going hard.
Now, in your opinion, do you feel that the convoy was a success? And what I mean by that is, no, you did not speak to the Prime Minister. You didn't change his mind, or the Liberal government, or the coalition of the Liberal NDPs
and conservatives.
Yep.
However, you just spoke to us about a credit union in the Niagara region that basically shut down an account over customers who are going through similar trials that you are. So I think it's fair to say that, not all has been restored. But
No,
in general,
I
would you
think it's been
say that
exposed.
the convoy was a success?
I would say that we gave people hope. You said before, there's certain people out there that are going to sleep, and you won't be able to wake them up. But I've got I've got letters, and I've spoke with people before that, like I said, we saved one life. If somebody looked at the convoy and thought, that's an excuse so that I don't have to take that drink or take that bottle of pills or end my life in a way, then we've won that, and we've exposed a lot of the corruption in the system. You look at the things that are now in the light, the banking system and how well it's controlled by the federal government. We had our bank accounts seized. One of my personal accounts at Toronto Dominion Bank was seized for 3.5 months with no excuse why. Um, and those are all the things that have been exposed. So, Prime Minister, for not having that conversation with us, I don't think his polls can get any lower. He's yelled at repeatedly wherever he goes. He's heckled, I guess is the proper word for it. Did that happen before the convoy? I don't think it happened to the extent that's happening right now. So we've definitely opened a lot of eyes, but we're continuing to open a lot of eyes too. So, and even the length of this trial. I mean, we're day 26. The trial was supposed to be 16 days and done. We should have technically been done through this, waiting a decision on the ruling on it right now. And we don't have an end in sight right now. We have this November 20th is a day in trial. I'm allowed to attend via Zoom. Thank goodness. It's just one day. But November 27th, we got to be back out in Ottawa for 5 days of court, and then there's no dates forward on that. And
What hotel do they
that
pay
won't even
for
get us
and
through the
food?
defense.
What hotel and food are
What,
they
through the
paying
trial?
for? Yeah.
Not a one, not no. We got an Airbnb, and it's a little ways away from the city of Ottawa for safety reasons. There's people out there that wish us harm. We understand that. I travel with my wife. My daughter was out there for the last months of trial, so protecting them is number one. Making sure that we're safe when we're sleeping at night. So there's some evil people out there. We know that. So we don't get any funding for that, but thankfully the community's come together and done some fundraising, and it's helped us out tremendously when it comes to the expense. Living, basically been out there in 2 months of living in Ottawa, so that's atrocious. I'm going to head up to Fort St. John, British Columbia on the 17th of November, just this week on Friday. One of the other truckers, if you watched Unacceptable, you would know the name Bern Buchert, which is the balder guy in the documentary, the trucker with the mandate freedom across the length of his trailer. Bern is facing trial December 4th in Ottawa, and he needs some assistance. So I've had a lot of people that have stepped up to the plate to try and help me through this, and I will do what I can to make sure those other guys are looked after too. So my little dog Zippy and I are going to drive up to Fort St. John on the 17th and help him out with a fundraiser. We're going to do a little bit of it's a mini preview of the documentary Unacceptable. And then we'll do a Q&A session and a meet and greet and just hang out with some like-minded individuals. And I can't wait. I'm super excited. So Ben Benjamin Hobb and Johanna Hobb, the producers of Unacceptable, will be there. They're putting it on for Burn, and it's going to be amazing. I can't wait.
So Chris, talk a little bit about the trial in the sense of, were you anticipating that it would go this long, that there would be so many delays, kind of your general feel of things so far?
It's honestly mentally draining to sit there day after day in court and see how the wheels of justice turn, relatively slow. You just kind of want to look like, let's go, let's get this on. And like I said, we're on day 26 now. It should have been a 16-day trial, where we'll be 3 months into this thing before it's said and done. And there's some other stuff that's coming too. The Crown prosecutors launched what they call a Carter application against us. If I am found guilty of anything, mischief, or any of the 7 indictable offenses that I'm charged with right now, that means that guilty charge will then move on to Tamara too, which is right now it's not like that. So that is going to be about a 4 day argument trial, and then the judge will have to take that and decide whether it's a go or not. We pretty strong evidence that says, Tamara and I were we didn't do a ton of stuff together at the convoy. I was off doing my thing, she was off doing her thing, more or less meaty, and I was on the street walking. So it's no right for that to be used against us, but it's still something that has to be argued. So
I feel like they're trying to find anything, use anything they possibly can.
Well, it reminds me, it harkens to the January 6th American trials situations. Yeah, where they're trying to use any form of legalese or old laws, not even case laws, but just they're trying to bring laws that exist but have not been utilized in order to punish, in my opinion, good people. And the sad part about it is, just like we talked about the monument, the Terry Fox monument, when they do these illegal acts, and it is illegal, even though it's it's legally illegal. And you know, people, if you know, but if you're of the mainstream, you'll say, I don't know what the hell that you're talking about. It's legal, therefore it should be done. And that's the crux that kind of annoys me, is you have the same thing but with two different perspectives, and all that people that watch the television need to do is just pay attention for 1 second, and you'll see they display the corruption. But that's the problem, in my opinion, with NPCs and lefties and people who are just too consumed with greed in their own life, while virtue signaling that they know information on all these topics because they watch 5 minutes of the news. They could, if they actually cared, they could watch 10 minutes. That's it. And they would clearly see that the logic of, well, you just brought this law in for this one case. And I can think of 30 cases in the last week that if you're going to bring it in for this, you definitely should have brought it in for this. But you haven't. You never did, not once up until now. And you won't do it again for the person of color who gets arrested for something different, because we dare not add to the statistics of a higher criminal record of any kind in certain virtue signaling categories. But instead, we'll throw these laws and usurp the law, really, to throw the book at good people while creating the straw man on television and disparaging your name or Tamara's name or any person they decide to put in this category. Well, people who watch the TV go, well, they wouldn't use that law. Steve, they wouldn't use that law if it wasn't meant to be, if they didn't do something wrong. And that's the extent of thought process, it seems like the average viewer uses, instead of activating some critical thinking. And why, for something so mundane, so nonviolent, would they attempt to utilize these laws in order to literally hurl a book at good people?
Well, it's tyrannical, isn't it?
It is tyrannical, and it really pisses me off, because you have, I personally, I don't know you personally, but I consider your character a good person.
Well, thanks.
The value system that your family has. I mean, just in this conversation, your dad, I don't know if he started the business, but that's where you began the story, and you're carrying it on. Your children are picking up the pieces, helping you out with the business. You must have taught, they must have learned, there must have been some family values that were picked up and kept, something that's not cherished or not utilized or doesn't seem to be prevalent that much in our country anymore. The family dinners, all the things that we see, good old boy type stuff that we're seeing here, that made our country great, that brought us to the place we were at before this pandemic, in my opinion. Our government and the people, the lazy, dumbed down people that work within our government, are literally taking the fruit off the lowest vine in order to scorch the earth. And they're not realizing that there's going to be no fruit left for themselves soon enough either.
Well, just the living in the city mentality that I've used to for the last couple months, being in Ottawa or in the surrounding area there's a huge difference between community when it comes to, you walk down the bike lane. I go for a walk all the time in Ottawa. You walk past people and you hardly even get you hardly even get notarized by the person walking at you. They can't even give you 2 seconds of eye contact to say good morning or how are you. Like I drive down my gravel road and my neighbor will stop with a pickup truck and we'll have a conversation out the window. That's the biggest thing you have when you go to get the mail in the local community. My family, farming community, my father is a retired farmer. I started my trucking company. I'm actually the trucker in the family. My father was a farmer, but one thing my father and I did at the same time when I was 18 years old was we went to get our trucking license together as father son. And so my father then did local grain hauling with the farm around here, and I then started my corporation. So my father actually came to work for me as an independent operator with his grain truck, and was my father and I trucked for years all over. We hauled equipment out of the States until Dad retired about, must have been 6 or 7 years ago now. But that's where that work ethic was installed in me. I believe it's the farming community. You work your tail off until it's supper, but you make sure you come into that house at supper time, or you're or you're gonna be in trouble.
That's right. The good old family values. To be in for supper time or whenever parents come a calling.
Yep.
The difference of a household when a child or teenager comes the first time they get called, or they smirk it off and with their friends and be like, nah, I heard, but don't worry. Exactly where the family structure and value system is here in
It's something
Canada.
lacking today, isn't it? It's lacking today. I grew up being afraid of my parents for discipline purposes, and I have to make abundantly clear on that my parents were not, abusive to me in any such way. But I was a smart ass kid growing up that was constantly in trouble, not with the law, but basically in school and that. And I would get home and I would be, disciplined on a regular basis. And I still say to this day, my father never booted my rear end for a time that I didn't deserve it. And that made me the character I am today. But I think that's missing in school now, in growing up now. Kids they don't have that anymore. Like, they're not scared of anybody growing up. You see the antics on social media when I'm carrying on my fun on social media regularly. The people will say anything out there because
They're
there's
all
no fear.
warriors.
Yeah, there's
Keyboard
right
warriors.
keyboard warriors. So never say it to my face, but they'll say it definitely behind that keyboard.
So, Chris, I think it's interesting, as we were talking about, you've been a law-abiding citizen your whole life, and you have had these charges against you. You've gone through this grueling trial. You've had your name put out in the media in a negative light. But I was wondering if you could talk about some of the positives that have come from this situation, maybe things you've been a part of, people you've met, the positivity that's come out of this unique situation.
Well, we just got back last night from Dr. Peter McCullough was in Red Deer, Alberta for a show, and the people that brought him in was a man by the name of Joseph Burgo, and Joseph Burgo is a business owner in the province of Saskatchewan in the ag industry. And Joseph started an organization called Canadians for Truth, and he has a media division of that organization now. And his two people that he has working right now is Jamie Soleil and Theo Fleury, which are Canadian gold medal Olympic medalists. And they put the show on with Dr. McCullough the other night. We were invited to come up to Red Deer for it, and that's an organization that I can get behind tenfold. What Joseph does is he speaks the truth, and it is exactly what we need right now. They're very out there and open with what's going on. Theo is an outspoken advocate for the government corruption and what's just like the WEF and all the stuff that's going on with the vaccines, with the vaccines, where it be. And it's a media way of getting the word out of what's actually going on right now. And I couldn't have been more happy and proud to be part of that organization, to sit there in the audience and listen to what was going on. There's a lot of information to be handed down through, guys like Dr. Peter McCullough. Like, holy cow, does he have a story behind him?
Yes, he's been another individual persecuted in the media.
Exactly.
Someone who speaks the truth and is trying to do the right thing, and yet is vilified on a daily basis.
He made the mistake of going on InfoWars a few years ago, so that definitely vilified him as well.
Alex Jones. There's a lot of people out there. You want to talk about Peter McCullough? You want to talk about, we've got the youngsters like Josh Alexander, Nick Alexander, and what they're doing for standing up for ladies in public school bathrooms, for crying out loud. I'm a father of an 18-year-old, and me and my daughter's now graduated from high school, and I'm thankful for that. Why?
Those boys are Christian as well.
Very much so. Yeah, very devout Christians. I've spent quite a bit of time with them when I was out in Ottawa. They go to the Bikers Church in whatever the suburb of Ottawa is there. Vanier, I think it is. Awesome kids. If that's what we have to look forward to with today's youth, my gosh, that's a good thing. They're fired up and they're ready to fight.
Yeah. That's hope.
It is, yeah, very much so.
Did you ever think when you made that drive down your driveway, leaving for the convoy, that 2 years later, where your life has taken you?
Man, I would say that I used to, my audience on social media used to be truckers. So up until the convoy time, I would have never have thought that. I had a lot of feelings of remorse. Sitting in the courtroom watching the judge or the Crown prosecutor play the videos of me prior to the convoy or during the convoy, where my language was a lot more vocal and I was a lot more fired up. And, I commonly would like to apologize to the judge for some of my use of my words in there, but I got fired up. And like I said, my audience was primarily truck drivers. So I could kind of get away with it then. But then all of a sudden I realized that there's kids watching my videos now. So I've corrected a lot of things in the last couple of years. And that is definitely one of them, my social media. I still like to get down in the trenches and fight, but when somebody tells me I hope that they hope that I die in a fiery plane crash, I like to make fun of them back and say, well, that's not very Christian or not very Canadian to say. You take their negativity and you twist it around. It drives them absolutely mad. I mean, they will go to the ends of the earth to try and find a way to get you back for being polite and criticizing them.
Yeah, they'll angrily show you their love and tolerance pretty well.
Right. And they claim that we're the angry, violent people here. So,
yeah.
So, Chris, what is your future looking like going forward?
Well, we got to get through this trial. So I'm hoping that we'll be done our defense and maybe have an answer from the judge by Christmas. The feelings kind of dwindling that it'll be by Christmas, by every day now. So maybe by early 2024 we'll have a decision. Hopefully it's a positive decision. Tamara and I, I've never considered myself a public speaking kind of person. I don't do well in front of a crowd of people. I used to be extremely nervous with just like this, knowing that there's going to be people watching this, but I'm slowly adapting to it and getting more comfortable with my surroundings. So there will be some go out and say thank you to a lot of the people that supported us through that. Tamara and I can speak again someday soon. I know I've got quite the story to tell with a lot of different segments of the last couple of years here. So there possibly will be a book in the future once we know the verdict and everything that comes along with that. And then work. I mean, my son needs help with trucking. We're kind of in the slow period right now for egg hauling, but it's always busy, and spring is right around the corner, and then he's going to put me to work. So I'll get the truck up and running. Yeah, basically there won't be any convoys in my future anymore. I think that a lot of the stuff that's happened in the movement in the last little while is kind of almost, people have taken it farther than it probably should have went. The convoy will have a place in Canadian history, I think. But as far as it happening again, there's a group of people out there that seem to think that every issue that arises, we need to convoy to save the world. And it's been disheartening the last while too, with this last round of movements with the Save the Children movement. I'm trying to push the narrative when somebody asks me my opinion on that. I try to say the same thing: is if you want to save the children, go home, get involved with your local school board, go to your school, your kids' library in the school, and look at the books that they're reading to the kids in there. Get involved in your kids' education again. Get involved in your local community. Become part of the city. The counselors. We need help there, and that's what Alberta's doing that right now with the government. They're getting involved with their local government, and they're taking back Alberta slowly. That's what we need to be focused on right now.
That's right. Freedom people need to, I think, and again, It sounds like it's your opinion. I know it's opinion based for me, and people will do whatever they want to do, and
Yep.
they're free.
100%.
That's the whole point. We are free to do whatever we want to do.
Yep.
But I've had the same sort of feeling, you have people, I'm sure, calling you from different factions, or have had, saying this is what's going to go on. It's going to be great. It's going to, it'll be this, it'll be that.
We need you.
Exactly. We need you. But whether it's God, whether it's our own moral compass, maybe kind of bringing us from what we've done, what we know, to kind of assess the situation. And there's a mental understanding in my own head, and I might be on an island by myself, but I was thinking the same thing, that you can't recreate the same blockbuster original as a sequel. It doesn't happen. And the whole point of grassroots, right? A grassroots movement is, the word organic comes to mind. The original Convoy was just that. It was organic. There were mistakes, obviously, the GoFundMe account instead of, if there was another option. That's the point, though. It's organic. We were doing the best we can, shooting for the stars.
Yep.
To accomplish a peaceful goal that hadn't been tried before in this country, or really anywhere. And I find it a little bit sad when we have such an energetic, loving group of people spread out throughout the country, but they're doing the same thing. It seems like what the human nature thing that the leftists do is, they're activated for a period of time. They're aware, their critical thinking is on point, and then a switch goes off to, this is the way we do it. All I have to do is get up in the morning and go through the pace of picking up a flag, chanting freedom. And what else do we got to do? Right. But that's not going to get it done. That's great. We need that. We'll always need a flag waving somewhere, but to recreate a convoy, to try to do the same thing again, it just doesn't have the same oomph. We need, as a people, to come up with something that brings in the masses, right? The other side, something benevolent, something loving, but we can't just say, let's hop in our cars and trucks. It has to be just as grassroots, just as organic, if anything at all. But I think for people like you, I think when the time comes, either you'll know it, or you'll know who to pass the baton to, if that time ever comes. What do you have anything to say to my rant right there?
Yeah, I agree. I think what happened with the million-person march, I think that was a success when you watch, the two cultures, like the Muslim community and the Christian community, comes together and takes a stand. I think that was exactly how it should have happened. Every community came together and did their own thing in that community, and that's exactly what it takes. A lot of people don't understand when it comes to to some of the protests and the convoys. They're looking for the blessing from myself or Tamara, and they don't understand that if we give a blessing for something like that, for a convoy, we go to jail for a breach charge, and that is this is the hard cold truth, unfortunately. And that is not something that we're prepared to do, is spend any time in jail for that right now. So it was kind of the whole convoy back to Ottawa idea here while we were in the middle of trial. I'll be honest with you, it felt like a slap in the face to us, because it was, could you let us get through our trial here first before we attempt that sort of thing again? And getting to trial in the morning in the courthouse, if you're flooding the city of protesters, it's a hard thing to do with traffic in downtown Ottawa. So that was one of our concerns, I guess, that some people didn't quite think past, and that was a little disheartening.
I think that you made a great point. People need to do things in their own communities. If you're passionate about an issue, you need to take action and go directly to the source and find more like-minded people and go as a group. And that's how things get done. There's grassroots, I feel, is the best method to start to get things going. But one of the things I think, one of my takeaways is we all need to be passionate and we all need to take action. We can't just be keyboard warriors, say good things, and then just sit on the couch. Steve and I talk about this all the time. If you're passionate about something, if something is bothering you and you want to see change, you have to be the one to make that change.
100%.
And to your point, again, we were involved with the Million Children March in Windsor, where we're from. And yeah, it was very, in our opinion, successful. But again, to your point, we have to be on the school board. We need to be attending meetings. We need to be talking to our children, seeing what's going on in the schools. We need to get back to basics, just having dinner with our family at the table, turning the TV off, having a conversation.
Discuss what's going on in your kids' days. That's a huge thing. A lot of people are up in arms over Saskatchewan government, Scott Moe coming out with a new bill to give parents parental control within the school system again. And the left is losing their mind. Like, this is just a travesty. And I kind of commonly keep thinking to myself, I'm like, gosh, like, you want the state to raise our children and you're okay with that?
Yeah, well, when they frame it as like everything they do, whether it's abortion topic, right? Everybody, when they're trying to make their point, everyone's a rape victim. Everyone that wants an abortion, right? Obviously, it's the lowest percentile, but they utilize the most worst case scenario as their platform to pass bills or to sway the public opinion. And it's the same with this scenario. They do that. They capitalize on emotions and pluck away at people and say it on the TV. Well, it's for this reason. That's why we should do it. And people just, without thinking, go, well, it sounds rational.
Yep.
If I don't think about it 1 second longer, it sounds rational. Sure. And then it happens. But as you were saying, if you're the person out there, whoever's listening, if you're the person that says, oh, Chris, I got the perfect thing for you to do, right? That means if you're saying that, you have a passion for it. Right. Chris might be a great face to do it, and he might have the knowledge. But if you have the passion, you don't need to look for other people to do it for you. You need to step up and do it, and perhaps get people with the same passion to help you out, listener. But you need to take the step, just like the day or a few days it took for Chris here and his wife and family to make the decision of what they were going to do and he was going to go to Ottawa. You have to find out what your passion is, take it out of park and drive, proverbially drive and do it yourself. And if you build it, they will come. It's pretty simple. But if you want to do something, people out there, then don't look for other people to do it for you. Start it yourself.
When that 40% of Canadians that just want to be left alone finally hit their breaking point, I think we'll see real change in this country. But it has to take that breaking point before people open their eyes and decide to stand up. We had somebody here a little while ago that wasn't really necessarily on the freedom side of things, didn't really understand the protests in Ottawa, but his wife definitely was, until the government started clamping down on podcasters. And then he all of a sudden opened his eyes and went, wait a minute, I like my Joe Rogan. I like my, Peterson. And then it mattered to him. And then he opened his eyes to the rest of the things that were going on and went, holy cow, I've been missing this. So we wake one person up a day, we're winning.
Yep.
Absolutely. Chris, we so value your time with us this evening. It's been such a fascinating conversation. I was wondering if you have any final thoughts for our audience.
Well, I mean, keep the support going across the country. I know the government seems like, or the media seems like, they're taking a little bit of the attention off our trials right now. They kind of want to sweep it under the rug and not look at that. But the truth's coming out in the courtroom right now. We're seeing what the actual side of things happened. There's a lot of truckers that are still facing trial, unfortunately, in Ottawa. So keep the prayers coming and keep watching the social media, the YouTubes, the Facebooks, for just the stories of the Bern Bucherts, the Harold Yonkers, the Saba, there's a lot of people out there that need our help right now, financially, spiritually, mentally, and just know that there's support out there. So please keep that coming. It's really detrimental towards the continued fight here.
And the Coots boys,
Oh,
they
yeah, we didn't even touch on that. I mean, gosh, there's four guys that have been sitting in a jail cell for 600 and what is it, 30 days now, with no
Yeah.
bail hearings and nothing. And I don't know what will wake people up in this country a little bit more to look around and think of what's going on. There's no evidence against them. There's allegations. I listened to protests in Toronto in here a few weeks ago in the Palestinian where they were chanting death to Jews, and actually heard somebody said they were chanting death to Prime Minister too. And there's no charges there, but they have these four guys locked up on one little text messages. It's ridiculous, and people need to open their eyes to this.
absolutely.
Definitely agree.
I had one last question that people throughout this entire movement, we've met a lot of people, come across a lot of people through this channel and through covering protests and being in Ottawa and other places. And a common thread from freedom people seems to be when they don't agree with something someone says within the freedom movement, the first thing they go to is controlled opposition, right? Now, I've heard that pretty much about everyone except myself, and I'm sure that it's been said. I just haven't heard it yet. I know how I would respond, right? If someone, which it would be surprising because I have diarrhea of the mouth. I say everything,
Yep.
right? So it's difficult for me to lie because I would just be caught the next second I talk anyway. But what could you say to either alleviate or brush off the people out there that call you potentially or always controlled opposition, or what? Tamara didn't get 2 years in jail, therefore she's controlled opposition.
Man, I've heard it all. Honestly, I've heard it all. I've heard that Tamara and I took off with millions of dollars and we ran off, or I've heard that we have it in offshore accounts. I've heard that my arrest was fake. I've heard that our whole trial is nothing but a political sham put on by
Your
I've
production crew.
I'm living in this skin right now. I can tell you that there's no place I would rather not be than sitting in a courtroom in downtown Ottawa right now. I can guarantee 100% that I'm not, controlled opposition or paid opposition or that. I believe it's people in the movement seeking attention or validation. I think there's a lot of division that I've seen within this side, and I see it as a common thread, and it's coming from people that are lacking the attention. They have a giant ego that needs to be filled. Anytime they want to trade places with me, I would be happy to trade places with them. Like I'm a farm boy. I'm happy going out and shoveling horse manure in the barn or looking after my dogs or my family here. I honestly have better places to be than sitting in a courtroom in downtown Ottawa. But nobody wants that spot. Nobody wants to take that, do that swap. But they'll sit there and they'll criticize. So Tamara is one of the kindest and nicest people that I've ever met, and she's in it for the right reasons. I've heard the same thing said about her. She can't defend herself on social media, but I can defend her for her. So I will continue to speak the truth, and that's all we can do. I mean, what else? They can continue to lie and spread their misinformation, but we'll just continue to stay on the right path. So
That's right. It's ironic too. The people that feel that way, that seem to seek the attention the most, don't actually, if put in that position, wouldn't want it.
right.
What is it Jesus said to Peter, right? You'll deny me 3 times before the rooster crows twice.
Yep.
And it seems that the majority of people out there, and it's human nature. So I'm not poo-pooing on the freedom movement whatsoever. I love the people in the freedom movement and the fact that we want our innate freedoms, which are reaffirmed under the Bill of Rights.
Mhm.
However, we all should be honest with ourselves. And if you seek the limelight, you should also understand that that could be a potential pitfall for you and the movement, because it's not about yourself. It's not about myself. It's not about Chris. It's not about Beth. It's not about any of us.
Yep.
It's about, in my opinion, getting back right with our moral code, which is God, which will then realign everything back under our Bill of Rights. And we can maybe have our beautiful country back and all the things that flourished in it before.
Yep, 100%.
Chris, is there any way that people can get in touch with you or follow you on social media?
Well, I guess my big account on TikTok, the one that I am the most polite on, would be my Big Red 1975 account. That's the TikTok account. Unfortunately, because of lawyer demands, it's a private account, so I have to approve anybody that comes into it. It will be open to the public again someday. I put a lot of good stuff on there. There is a troll account that I like to banter back and forth with the trolls in a polite, proper way. But you can find me technically on my Chris Barber. There's a Big Red official Facebook page where I tend to post updates about what we're doing and the fundraisers and the different things that we go to on a regular basis. It's there for the public to take a peek at, or to criticize, or to laugh at, whatever means possible. I'm just out here being the guy that I've always been, and just trying to fight the good fights. So I don't let the negative critics get to me, and it's just better to keep a smile on your face and move on with the day, right?
Absolutely.
100%. And we so admire and appreciate everything that you've done for our country. You are definitely, in my eyes, a hero. And we will continue to follow your story and pray for you, and that this has a positive resolution in the end. But as you said, God is on your side and has kept you in his presence. And I think that he will continue to do so.
When this trial is all said and done and we can go out and give ourselves a little bit of a thank you tour to everybody out there, I look forward to coming to the Windsor area. There's a lot of good freedom fighters in that area. I'm friends with quite a few. So I will hopefully get to meet you in person for something like that in the near future.
We would love that. Thank you for tuning in to the Truth Trumpet today. If you would like to get a hold of Steve or myself, you can email us at thetruchtrumpet@hotmail.com. We appreciate Chris's time, and we hope that you will continue as well to follow his story. As always, have a wonderful evening, and God bless.
You're loved.
Thanks.